July 2012. Iran tries to sell oil to India. India wants to buy. Both countries agree on price. The transaction should be simple, but it's impossible because SWIFT, the global payment network, has cut Iran off. No Iranian bank can send or receive international payments. The oil sits in tankers. India needs the energy. Iran needs the revenue. But without SWIFT access, the transaction cannot happen. One payment network in Belgium just vetoed a trade between two sovereign countries. Welcome to Financial Rewind. I'm here to expose the infrastructure of financial control. And today, we're revealing the battle between SWIFT and Brics payment systems. How one private company in Brussels controls 11,000 banks, processes $8 trillion daily, and takes orders from Washington to freeze entire countries out of global commerce, versus the alternative network Brics is building to route around it. This is financial warfare without bombs. The winner controls who gets to participate in the global economy. Let's start with what SWIFT actually is, because most people have never heard of it. SWIFT stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Founded in 1973. Headquartered in Brussels, Belgium, it's a messaging network, not a bank. It doesn't hold money. It doesn't transfer money. It sends secure messages between banks about transfers. Here's how it works. You wire money from Bank of America to Deutsche Bank. Your bank sends a SWIFT message. Transfer $10,000 from account X to account Y. Deutsche Bank receives the message. Credits the recipient's account. Banks settle with each other later. SWIFT is just the messenger. But the messenger is everything. Because without the message, the money doesn't move. Today, SWIFT connects 11,000 financial institutions in more than 200 countries, processes 42 million messages per day, $8 trillion in value daily. 90% of international payments touch SWIFT at some point. It's the central nervous system of global finance, and it has a kill switch. Here's when SWIFT became a weapon. After September 11th attacks, the U.S. Treasury demanded access to SWIFT data to track terrorist financing. SWIFT resisted initially. European privacy laws prohibited sharing customer data. The U.S. threatened sanctions on SWIFT itself. SWIFT complied, gave U.S. Treasury access to its database. Every international payment, who sent it, who received it, how much, when. The U.S. could now monitor global financial flows in real time. Then 2012, the U.S. and EU pressured SWIFT to disconnect Iranian banks. Iran was developing nuclear capabilities. Sanctions weren't working, so the U.S. used SWIFT as a weapon, cut Iran off completely. 30 Iranian banks lost access overnight. Iran's oil exports dropped by half. Not because of sanctions on oil, because buyers couldn't pay for it. The payment rails were severed. This was a revelation. SWIFT claimed to be neutral infrastructure, Swiss neutrality for the financial system. But when the U.S. demanded action, SWIFT complied. It wasn't neutral. It was Western-controlled, and every country watched. Let me show you how SWIFT disconnection works. Russia, 2022. After invading Ukraine, Western nations imposed sanctions, froze $300 billion in reserves. But that wasn't enough. March 2022, 7 major Russian banks were removed from SWIFT. Sberbank, Russia's largest bank. VTB, the second largest. Alfa Bank, all disconnected. Here's what happened immediately. Russian businesses couldn't receive payments from European customers. European businesses couldn't pay Russian suppliers. Trade froze. Not because goods weren't available, because the payment messages couldn't flow. Russian airlines couldn't pay Boeing for parts. European manufacturers couldn't pay for Russian titanium. Energy companies struggled to pay for gas. The economic damage was instant. Russia's GDP contracted 4% in 2022. Not from bombs, from disconnection. But here's what the West didn't anticipate. Russia had been preparing. Since 2014, after Crimea annexation, Russia saw SWIFT as a vulnerability. Started building alternatives. By 2022, the alternatives were ready. Enter SPFS, System for Transfer of Financial Messages. Russia's domestic SWIFT alternative. Launched in 2014. Operated by the Central Bank of Russia. By 2022, it connected 500 Russian banks, plus banks in 20 other countries. Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, even some Chinese banks. SPFS uses the same messaging format as SWIFT, so banks can easily integrate both systems. Transaction costs are lower. Messages process in seconds. And critically, the U.S. cannot monitor it, cannot sanction participants, cannot freeze it. When Russia was cut from SWIFT, trade didn't stop. It rerouted through SPFS. Russian oil sales to India, Russian gas to China, Russian grain to Middle East. All settled through SPFS. The volume exploded. 2021. SPFS processed 2 million messages. 2023, 20 million messages. 10 times growth in 2 years. The disconnection from SWIFT accelerated adoption of the alternative. Now let's talk about CIPS, Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, China's answer to SWIFT, launched in 2015. Operated by the People's Bank of China. Headquartered in Shanghai, CIPS settles transactions in yuan. Directly, no dollar conversion needed. No SWIFT messages needed. Here's the architecture. A Chinese company sells goods to a Brazilian company. Brazilian bank sends payment instruction through CIPS in yuan. Chinese bank receives yuan. Settlement happens instantly. No correspondent banking. No dollar intermediary. No SWIFT involvement. By 2024, CIPS connects 1,300 banks in 110 countries. Processes 100 billion yuan daily. That's $14 billion. Growing 50% annually. And here's the strategic element. Every Brics member is integrated into CIPS. Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, plus the new members. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Egypt. They can all transact in yuan through CIPS, bypassing SWIFT entirely. But the real innovation is mBridge, Multiple Central Bank Digital Currency Bridge. This is next-generation infrastructure, launched in 2021, built by Bank for International Settlements. Participants include China, UAE, Thailand, Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia. mBridge is a blockchain platform. Central banks issue digital currencies on it. Transactions settle peer-to-peer. No intermediary. No SWIFT messages. No correspondent banks. Here's a transaction. A company in Thailand wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia. Thailand's central bank digital bot converts to Saudi digital rial. On the mBridge platform, settlement in seconds. Cost is 90% lower than traditional banking, and completely invisible to SWIFT. The U.S. cannot monitor these transactions, cannot sanction participants, cannot freeze the network. mBridge went live in pilot phase in 2023. Processed $12 billion in first year. By 2024, over 50 central banks are testing it. This isn't fringe technology. This is official central bank infrastructure, designed explicitly to replace SWIFT, and it works better, faster, cheaper, more private. Let me show you how these systems work together. India buys Russian oil, transaction worth $900 million daily. Here's the flow. Russian oil company invoices in rubles. Indian refinery pays in rupees. The currency exchange happens through SPFS. No SWIFT message. No dollar conversion. Settlement between Russian and Indian banks directly. If the Indian company prefers yuan, it can use CIPS. Convert rupees to yuan through Chinese banks. Pay Russian supplier in yuan. Russian supplier converts yuan to rubles, all outside SWIFT. Or use mBridge if both central banks participate. Digital rupees convert to digital rubles. On blockchain. Instant settlement. 3 different pathways. None touch SWIFT. None use dollars. None are visible to you. Monitoring. This is why sanctions are losing effectiveness. The infrastructure to bypass them exists, and it's growing. Here's the data showing the shift. SWIFT message volume. 2012 was 4.6 billion messages annually. 2018 was 7 billion messages. 2022 was 10 billion messages. 2024 is 11 billion messages. Growth is slowing. Now look at alternatives. SPFS messages. 2021 was 2 million. 2024 is 20 million. 10 times growth. CIPS transaction volume. 2020 was 50 billion yuan daily. 2024 is 100 billion yuan daily. Doubled in 4 years. mBridge processed $12 billion in first year. Projected 50 billion in 2025. The alternative networks are growing faster than SWIFT. Much faster. Let me show you a specific country. Argentina, August 2023. Argentina facing currency crisis. Peso collapsing. Inflation at 130%. Needs to pay China for imports. $30 billion in annual trade. Normally this routes through dollars and SWIFT. But Argentina is short on dollars. China offers an alternative. Pay in yuan using CIPS. Argentina agrees. Signs currency swap with China. 18 billion yuan capacity. Now Argentine imports from China settle in yuan. Through CIPS. No dollars needed. No SWIFT needed. Argentina saves its dollar reserves. China gets paid in its own currency. Both countries bypass the dollar system. This is happening with dozens of countries. Bilateral currency swaps. Direct CIPS settlement. Each agreement weakens SWIFT's monopoly. Now let's talk about SWIFT's vulnerability. It's a single point of failure. All messages route through data centers in Belgium, Netherlands, and United States. If those centers go down, global finance freezes. In 2016, hackers stole $81 million from Bangladesh Central Bank, used stolen SWIFT credentials. The messages appeared legitimate. Bangladesh Bank's SWIFT connection was compromised. Money transferred to Philippines. Withdrawn in cash. Gone. SWIFT security was breached. If hackers can penetrate it, so can nation-states. China, Russia, Iran, all have sophisticated cyber capabilities. All have incentive to disrupt SWIFT. Because SWIFT is used against them, the more SWIFT becomes a sanctions tool, the more countries want to destroy it. Or bypass it. Brics chose bypass, but the attack option remains. Here's what SWIFT disconnection actually means. It's not just inconvenience. It's economic strangulation. When Iran was cut off in 2012, oil exports dropped from 2 million barrels daily to 1 million. Government revenue halved. Couldn't import medicine. Couldn't import food. Inflation spiked to 40%. People suffered. Not because Iran couldn't produce, because it couldn't transact. When Russia was partially cut off in 2022, similar effects. Trade disrupted. Supply chains broken. Economic contraction. SWIFT disconnection is financial execution. Without trial. Without appeal. A private company in Brussels, under pressure from Washington, decides which countries can participate in global commerce. That's the power SWIFT holds. And that's why Brics is building alternatives. Let me show you SWIFT's governance problem. SWIFT claims to be neutral. Cooperative, owned by member banks. Board has 25 directors from different countries. But look closer. The board includes representatives from U.S. banks, European banks, no Russian banks, no Iranian banks. No Chinese banks hold board seats proportional to their transaction volume. Decision-making is Western-dominated. And when the U.S. government pressures SWIFT, it complies. Every time. Iran in 2012. Russia in 2014 and 2022. North Korea. Venezuela. SWIFT disconnects on Western government orders. This isn't neutral infrastructure. It's a tool of Western foreign policy, dressed up as private, cooperative, and the rest of the world knows it. Now watch what happens when Brics alternatives scale. Today, 90% of international payments touch SWIFT. Brics alternatives handle maybe 5%. But the trajectory matters more than current state. If Brics alternatives reach 20% by 2027, SWIFT loses monopoly status. Banks will integrate multiple systems. SWIFT for Western trade. CIPS for Asian trade. SPFS for commodities. mBridge for central bank settlements. At 30%, the alternatives become primary for entire regions. At 50%, SWIFT becomes optional, a regional network for Western transactions, not global infrastructure. That's the tipping point. And current growth rates suggest we reach it by 2030, maybe sooner. Let me address what the U.S. can do. Option 1, build a better SWIFT. Faster, cheaper, more efficient. But SWIFT is already fast for what it does. Messages transmit in seconds. The delay is in banks processing them. That's not a SWIFT problem. That's a banking structure problem. Fixing it requires rebuilding correspondent banking. That takes decades. Option 2, make SWIFT more inclusive. Give China, Russia, India more governance power. But that defeats the purpose. The U.S. uses SWIFT as a control mechanism. Sharing control means losing the weapon. Politically impossible. Option 3, prevent countries from joining Brics alternatives. Sanction banks that use CIPS or SPFS. But how do you sanction half the world's banks? And the sanction threat is why they're leaving? More threats accelerate the exit. Option 4, accept the change. Adapt to a multi-network world, where SWIFT is one option among several. This is probably what happens. Not by choice, by necessity. Here's what I think unfolds. Pattern recognition, not prediction. Phase 1, now through 2025. Brics alternatives grow to 15% of global payment volume. SWIFT remains dominant but no longer monopolistic. Phase 2, 2025 through 2027. Major economies integrate multiple systems. Banks support SWIFT, CIPS, and mBridge simultaneously. Businesses choose based on transaction type. Western trade uses SWIFT. Asian trade uses CIPS. Commodity trade uses whatever seller prefers. Phase 3, 2027 through 2030. Brics alternatives reach 30%. Certain regions stop using SWIFT entirely. Southeast Asia. Middle East oil trade, Latin America commodity trade, all migrate to alternatives. Phase 4, post-2030. SWIFT becomes regional network for Western transactions. CIPS dominates Asian trade. mBridge handles central bank settlements. Multiple networks coexist. None has monopoly. This is where we're heading. Not SWIFT collapse. SWIFT regionalization. Let me show you the counterargument. SWIFT has network effects. The more banks use it, the more valuable it is. Switching costs are high. Banks invested billions integrating SWIFT. Training staff. Building processes. They won't abandon it easily. And SWIFT is proven. 50 years of operation, billions of transactions. Tested, reliable infrastructure. Brics alternatives are experimental by comparison. CIPS launched in 2015. mBridge in 2021. They haven't been tested at scale. Haven't faced a major crisis. Unknown how they perform under stress. Plus, SWIFT is upgrading. Working on instant settlement. Lower costs, better security. It's not standing still. So maybe SWIFT adapts and survives. Remains dominant through continuous improvement. That's possible. But here's the problem with this argument. It assumes countries want to stay on SWIFT. Assumes trust hasn't been broken. But trust has been broken. When Iran was cut off, every country asked themselves, could this happen to us? When Russia's reserves were frozen, the answer became yes. Now it's not about whether SWIFT is good infrastructure. It's about whether you trust the people controlling it. And increasingly, countries don't. That's not a technical problem. That's a political problem. You can't fix it with better technology. Let me show you what this means for regular people. Because this isn't just central banks and corporations. You send money to family overseas. Western Union charges 12%. Uses SWIFT in the background. Takes 3 days. With CIPS or mBridge, cost drops to 2%. Clears in minutes. You import goods from China. Bank charges 3% for currency conversion. Uses correspondent banking through SWIFT. Takes 5 days to settle. With direct CIPS settlement, cost is 1%. Settles same day. You work for a company with international suppliers. Every payment goes through SWIFT. Bank fees add up. Delays cause problems. Alternative networks cut costs by 70%. Speed up settlement by 80%. This affects real businesses, real people, real costs. The competition is good. Forces SWIFT to improve. Lowers prices for everyone. Here are 5 signals to watch. These tell you how fast the shift is happening. Signal 1. Number of banks integrated with CIPS. Currently 1,300. If it reaches 2,000 by end of 2025, adoption is accelerating. CIPS publishes membership data. Signal 2. SPFS message volume. Currently 20 million annually. If it hits 50 million by 2026, it's becoming major infrastructure. Russian central bank releases quarterly stats. Signal 3. Countries joining mBridge pilot. Currently 50 testing. If 20 commit to production use by 2027, it's crossing into mainstream. BIS provides updates. Signal 4. Share of China trade settled in yuan. Currently about 30%. If it reaches 50% by 2028, yuan is truly internationalizing. Chinese customs data shows this. Signal 5. SWIFT message growth rate. Currently growing 5% annually. If growth drops below 3%, it means volume is migrating. SWIFT publishes annual reports. All 5 signals flashing? The alternative networks are winning. Faster than expected. Now let me be clear about what this is. This is not the end of SWIFT. SWIFT will continue operating, serving Western financial institutions, processing trillions in transactions, remaining important for dollar-based trade. But this is the end of SWIFT monopoly. The end of one network controlling all international payments. The end of one power center deciding who can transact. That era is closing. The new era is multi-network. Multiple payment rails. Multiple currencies. Multiple centers of power. SWIFT for some trades. CIPS for others. SPFS for commodities. mBridge for central banks. All coexisting. All competing. None dominant. Some see this as fragmentation. Some see it as healthy competition. I see it as inevitable. In 1973, SWIFT was created to standardize international payments. Replace telegraph messages with secure digital network. It succeeded brilliantly, became global infrastructure, essential plumbing for finance. But it also became a weapon, used to enforce Western policy, cut countries off, monitor transactions, control commerce. And that success contained the seeds of its own disruption. Because the more SWIFT was weaponized, the more countries needed alternatives. The more it became a tool of control, the more the controlled sought freedom. And now the alternatives exist. They work. They're growing. They're better in some ways. Faster, cheaper, more private. The monopoly is breaking. not because SWIFT failed technically, because it succeeded politically as a weapon, and weapons create enemies. Who build defenses? History doesn't repeat. It reveals, and right now it's revealing that payment networks are infrastructure. Infrastructure can be replaced, and when one network becomes a political tool, others will be built. Not because they're better, because they're not weaponizable. Welcome to the network war. SWIFT versus Brics alternatives. Billions of messages. Trillions in value. Competing for the right to process the world's payments. The winner doesn't control armies. The winner controls who gets to trade. And that's more powerful than any military. The battle is quiet. Fought in bank data centers. Through blockchain code. In bilateral currency swaps, no bombs. No invasions. Just alternative payment rails. Undermining dollar power. One transaction at a time.